Bud Not Buddy, Chapter 8, Part 1, pages 60 through 77. Something stepped on a little stick. As soon as the twig cracked, my eyes snapped open and I was wide awake. I held my breath and kept as still as I could. Whatever it was that was sneaking up on me knew I woke up, 'cause it stopped moving and kept as still as it could, too. Even though my head was still under my blanket, I could feel two eyes staring at me real hard, and I knew these weren't critter eyes. These eyes made the hair on the back of my neck raise up, the way only human being eyes can do. Without wiggling or jiggling around too much under my blanket, I got my fingers wrapped around my jackknife. Right when I was ready to push the covers off of me and start running or stabbing, whoever it was that had been watching me jumped right on top of me. I was trapped as a roach under a dish rag. I tried to guess the exact spot of the person's heart was at, then pulled my knife back. A voice said, "If you ain't a kid called Bud from the home, I'm really sorry about jumping on you like this." It was Bugs. When I tried to talk, it felt like I had to suck all the air out of Flint. I finally got breathing right and said, "Doggone it, Bugs, it is me. You nearly scared me to death." He got off of me and I threw my blanket over to the side. "You don't know how lucky you are. I was just about fixing to stab you in the heart." Bugs looked like he knew he just had a real close call. He said, "I'm sorry, Bud. I didn't mean to scare you, but everybody knows how you like to sleep with that knife open. So I figure I best grab hold of you so's you wouldn't wake up slicing nobody." Shucks. Even though it was Bugs who come real close to getting his heart poked, I was the one who was still having trouble catching my breath. I asked, "How come you ain't back at the home?" But before he had a chance to answer, I knew. "You're on the lam." Bugs said, "Yep, I'm going back to riding the rails. When I heard about you beating that kid up so bad that you had to take off, I figured it was time for me to get going too. I thought you might be hanging around the library, so I came down to see if you wanted to go with me." "Where are you heading?" "There's always fruits to be picked out west. I heard we can make enough money to get by out there." "There's supposed to be a train leaving sometime tomorrow. Did you really beat that kid up in the foster home?" I said, "Uh-huh. We kind of had a fight." How long's it take? How long's it take to get out west?" Bug said, "Depends on how many trains you gotta hop." "Was he really 2 years older than you?" "Uh-huh. He was 12. Is it fun to hop a train?" "Some of the time it is. Some of the time it's scary." "We heard he was kind of big, too, was he?" I said, "He was pretty big. I can't see how we can hop on a train. They look like they're moving pretty doggone fast." Bug said, "Most of the time you don't hop on them when they're going fast. Most of the time you try to climb on one when it's sitting in the train yard." "Did the guy cry after you whooped him?" "Well, kind of. He looked real scared and then told his mama to keep me away from him. They even said I was a hoodlum." "Will we be sleeping on the train and everything?" "Sure we will. Some of the times the trains don't stop for 2 or 3 days." Man, I always try to tell people that just because someone's skinny, it don't mean they can't fight. You're a hero now, Bud. "Nah, I didn't really do nothing much." "Well, how about the toilet? How are we going to use the toilet if the train don't stop?" Bug said, "You just kind of lean out the door and go. When the train's still moving, yeah, you get a real nice breeze." "Oh man, that sounds great. Count me in. I can't wait." I spit a big glob Bugs spit a big glob of slob in his hand and said, I knew I could depend on you, Bud. I spit a big glob in my hand and said, We're brothers forever, Bugs. We slapped our hands together as hard as we could and got our slobs mixed up real good, then waved them in the air so they'd dry. Now it was official. I finally had a brother. Bugs said, We'll go down to the mission. There's bound to be someone there that knows where we can hop the train. Then we'll be on the lam together. We found out that we had to go to a city called Hooperville, just outside of Flint. The only trouble was nobody knew exactly where Hooperville was. It was dark before we found out the right direction. I never heard of a city that was so doggone hard to find. We walked on the trail through some woods that ran right up against Thread Creek. We could tell we were getting close to Hooperville because we heard somebody playing a mouth organ, and the smell of food cooking was getting stronger. We kept walking in the direction that the sky was glowing with an orangish light. When we could hear the music real clear and the folks talking to each other, and the sounds of sticks cracking in a fire, we started cutting through the trees. That way we could peek into Hooperville first. We looked out from behind the big tree and saw that a big wind or even 2 or 3 big wolves huffing and puffing real hard can blow Hooperville into the next county. It was a bunch of huts and shacks thrown together out of pieces of boxes and wood and cloth. The Amos's shed would have looked real fancy at house out here. Right near our tree was a big fire that had been lighting up the sky. It looked like 100 people were sitting around it, watching things burn or waiting for the food cooking in 3 big pots set up in the fire. There were two littler fires burning in Hooperville. One had a pot that was big enough to boil a whole person in it. A man was stirring things in the pot with a big stick, and when he raised the stick, he'd pull up some breeches or a shirt out and passed it over to a white man who was hanging the clothes on a line to dry. There was a mountain of clothes on the ground next to him waiting on their turn. The other fire in Hooperville was real small. It was off to the side by itself. There were 5 white people sitting at this fire, 2 kids, a man, and a woman holding a little wrapped up baby. The baby sounded like all those new sick babies at the home. It was coughing like it was a half dead little animal. Bugs whispered, Shoot, this ain't no city. This is just another cardboard jungle. A what? A cardboard jungle. Somewhere you can get off the train and clean up and get something to eat without cops chasing you out of town. I said, Well, what are we going to do? We can't just go busting into this city and expect someone to feed us. Can we? Bug said, One of us has got to go talk to them. Let's flip for it. Okay. Bugs rumbled around in his pocket and found a penny. He rubbed it up against his breeches and said, Heads, I win. Tails, you lose. Okay. He flipped the penny up into the air and caught it, then slapped it down on the back of his left hand. He peeked underneath his right hand to see, and a big smile cracked his face. Shucks. Bug said, Tails, you lose. Dang. So what should I say? Ask them if this is Hooperville. See if they got any extra food. I moved out from behind our tree and walked over towards the biggest fire. I waited until some folks noticed me and then said, Excuse me, is this here Hooperville? The man who was playing the mouth organ stopped, and everyone else around the fire looked up at me. One of the white men said, What is it that you're looking for? I said, A city called Hooperville, sir. They all laughed. The mouth organ man said, Nah, son. What you're looking for is Hoover, with a V, like in President Herbert Hoover. Oh, I said. I said, "Oh, is this it, sir?" The man said, "This is one of them." I said, "One of them?" He answered, "They're all over the country. This here is the Flint version." "And all of them are called Hooverville?" "That's right. Mr. Hoover worked so hard at making sure every city has got one that it seems like it would be criminal to call them anything else." Someone said, "That's the truth." I said, "How are we going to know if we're in the right one?" The mouth organ man said, "Are you hungry?" "Yes, sir." "Are you tired?" "Yes, sir." "Are you scared about what's going to happen tomorrow?" I didn't want anyone to think I was a baby, so I said, "Not exactly scared, sir. Maybe I'm a little bit nervous." The man smiled and said, "Well, son, any place where there are other folks in need of the same things that you are is the right place to be. This is exactly the Hooverville you are looking for." I knew what the man was trying to say. This was the exact same kind of circle talking and cross talking that Mama used to do. Bugs hadn't had that kind of practice. He came from behind the tree and said, "I don't get it. You said there were Hoovervilles all over the place. What if we was looking for a Hooverville in Detroit or Chicago? How could this be the right one to be in?" The man says, "You boys from Flint?" I said, "Yes, sir." The man waved his mouth organ like a magic wand and pointed it all over the little cardboard city. "Boys," he said, "look around you." The city was bigger than I thought it was. The raggedy little huts were in every direction you looked. And there were more people sitting around than I first thought, too. Mostly it was men and big boys, but there were a couple of women out every now and then, and a kid or two. They were all the colors you can think of, black, white, and brown. But the fire made everyone look like they were little different shades of orange. There were dark orange folks sitting next to medium orange folks sitting next to light orange folks. "All these people," the mouth organ man said, "are just like you. They're tired, hungry, and a little bit nervous about tomorrow. This here is the right place for y'all to be 'cause we're all in the same boat, and you boys are nearer to home than you'll ever get." Someone said, "Amen, brother." The mouth organ man said, "It don't matter if you're looking for Chicago or Detroit or Orlando or Oklahoma City. I rode the rails to all of them. You might think or you might hear that things are better just down the line, but they're singing the same sad song all over this country. Believe me, son, being on the road is no good. If you two boys are from Flint, this is the right Hooverville to be for you." Someone said, "Brother, why don't you feed these boys? That one looked like he ain't et in 2 or 3 months." Shucks, they didn't have to point or nothing. Everyone knew who he meant. But I didn't care. The food was bubbling up, and those 3 big pots even sounded delicious. The mouth organ man said, "You're welcome to join us, but we all pitch in here, so unless either one of you is carrying one of them smoked West Virginia hands in them bags, it looks like you'll be pulling KP tonight." I said, "Pulling what, sir?" He said, "KP, kitchen police. You do the cleanup after everyone had their fill. There's a couple of other young folks who'll show you what you have to do." Me and Bugs both looked at each other. Yes, sir. This seemed like a real good trade. The woman handed me and Bugs each a flat, square, empty tin. "That, me lords, is your china. Please be careful not to chip it." My china had the words Jumbo A&P Sardines stamped into the bottom of it. She handed us 2 beat-up old spoons and said, "Don't be shy. You two just about missed supper. You best hurry up." She took us over to one of the big pots and filled up our tin plates. "You're lucky," she said. "It's muskrat stew, and there's plenty left over tonight. Eat as much as you can." The stew was made out of dandelion greens and a couple of potatoes and small wild carrots and some crawdads and a couple of little chunks of meat. It tasted great. We both got seconds. When we were done, the woman told us, "You boys leave your bags here. It's time to do the dishes now." Uh-oh. "Ma'am, I like to keep my suitcase with me wherever I go." "I promise your suitcase will be safe here." I remembered the Amoses had promised the same thing, and I said, "You'll watch it yourself, ma'am? You'll make sure no one looks inside of it?" She said, "Son, we don't have no thieving in here. We all look out for each other." I said, "Thank you, ma'am," and put my suitcase down near the woman's feet. Me, Bugs, a little white boy, and a little girl loaded a whole mess of dirty tin cans and spoons and a couple of real plates and forks into a big wooden box and lugged them down to Thread Creek. The little girl had been in Hooverville the longest, so she got to tell the rest of us what to do. She said, "I don't suppose neither of you new boys knows how to do the dishes the right way, do you?" Me and Bugs had done tons of dishes in the home, so I said, "Sure we do. We used to be real good at cleaning up." Bugs said, "Dang girl, you act like this is the first cardboard jungle I've been in. I know how you do dishes out here." She said, "Okay then, we'll split them up. You and you," she pointed to Bugs and the other kid, "can do half, and me and this boy can do the others. What's your name?" I said, "Bud, not Buddy." She said, "I'm Deeza Malone." Deeza handed Bugs and the other little boy some rags, some soap powder, and they started splashing dishes in the water. Me and the girl walked a little farther up the creek and started unloading the rest of the dishes. "You dry, I'll wash," she said. She handed me a rag, and just as soon as she splashed one of the tins in the water and give it to me, I'd dry it and stick it in the wooden box. She said, "Where was you from?" "Flint, right here." "So, you and your friend come down here to get on that train tomorrow?" "Where's it going?" "Chicago," she said. "Is that west from here?" "Uh-huh." "Then, yep, that's where we're heading," I said. "Where are you from?" "Lancaster, Pennsylvania." "Are you going to take the train too?" She said, "Uh-uh. My daddy is. Folks say there's work out west, so he's going to try again." "So you're going to wait here for him?" "Uh-huh." She was real fast at washing the dishes, but I noticed she kind of got slow and was touching my hand a lot when it came to giving them to me. She said, "Where's your mama and daddy?" "My mother died 4 years ago." "Sorry to hear that." "It's okay. She didn't suffer or nothing." "So where's your daddy?" "I think he lives in Grand Rapids. I never met him." "Sorry to hear that." Shucks, she held right on to my hand when she said that. I squirmed my hand loose and said, "That's okay too." Jesus said, "No, it's not, and you should quit pretending that it is." "Who said I'm pretending anything?" "I know you are. My daddy says families are the most important thing there is. That's why me and my mama are going to wait together for him to come back or to wait for us to come to him." I said, "My mother said the same thing, that families should be there for each other all the time. She always used to tell me that no matter where I went or what I did, that she'd be there for me, even if she wasn't somewhere that I could see her. She told me." Shucks. There's some folks who'll just have you running your mouth before you know what you're doing. I quit talking and acting like I was having a real hard time drying the tin cans she just handed me. "What'd she tell you, Bud?" I looked at Deeza Malone and figured I'd never see her again in my life, so I kept shooting my mouth off my mouth. She would tell me that every night before I went to sleep, that no matter what happened, I could sleep knowing that there had never been a little boy anywhere, anytime, who was loved more than she loved me. She told me that as long as I remembered that, I'd be okay. And you knew it was the truth. Just as much as I know my name is Bud, not Buddy. She said, "Don't you have any other kin here in Flint?" "No. Kin is just another way, like family." "I guess I can't blame you for wanting to ride the rails. My mama says these poor kids on the road all alone are like dust in the wind. But I guess you're different, aren't you, Bud? I guess you sort of carry your family around inside of you, huh?" "I guess I do. Inside my suitcase, too." She said, "So you've been staying in an orphanage since your mama died?" "What makes you say that?" "Well, you're kind of skinny, but I can tell by the way you talk and the way you act that you haven't been out on the road very long. You still look young." I said, "Shucks, I'm not all that young. I'm going to be 11 on November 14th, and I'm not skinny. I'm wiry. Some folks think I'm a hero." "So, Mr. Hero, we're the same age, but you have to have been staying in an orphanage." "I've been staying in a home. My daddy says that being on the road ain't fit for a dog, much less a kid. How come you just don't go back to your orphanage?" She started up touching my hand too much again. Diza Malone seemed like she was all right, so I came clean with her. "Don't tell no one, but I lit out from a foster home, so I'm on the lam, and I wouldn't go back to the home even if I could. It's getting so there's too many kids in there." "So that's better than being cold and hungry all the time and dodging the railroad police." "What do you mean?" "You don't think they're just going to let people jump on the trains, do you?" "Well, I guess I hadn't thought about it. See, I knew you were too nice to have been out on the road. You're going to have a bad surprise tomorrow morning." "That won't bother me too much." She said, "Oh, yeah. I forgot you're a hero to some folks." When Diza smiled, a little dimple jumped up on her brown cheek. I didn't answer. I just kept drying tin cans. We got to the last 4 or 5 tin can plates, and Diza said, "You ever kiss a girl at the orphanage?" Uh-oh. "Are you kidding?" "No." "Why, are you afraid of girls?" "You must be kidding." She said, "Okay," and closed her eyes and mushed her lips up and leaned close to me. Dangy, if I didn't kiss her, she'd think I was scared of girls. If I did kiss her, she might blab, or bugs might see me and tell strangers about what happened. I looked down the creek to where Bugs and the other boy were, still splashing in the water. It was dark enough that I didn't think they could see us too good. I scooched my lips up and smashed my face on Diza Malone's. We stuck like that for a hot second, but it felt like a long time. When I opened my eyes and pulled back, Diza kept her eyes closed and smiled. She looked down and stuck her hand in mine again, and this time I let her keep it there. She looked out at the creek and the woods on the other side and said, "Isn't this romantic?" I looked out to see what she was talking about. The only thing I could see was the moon like a big egg yolk way up in the sky. You could hear the water and the sound of the mouth organ man playing a sad song back in Hooverville. I sneaked another peek at Diza's dimple. She said, "You hear that? That's Shenandoah he's playing. Isn't it pretty?" "I guess so." "Do you know the words?" "Uh-uh. Listen. It's been 7 long years since I've last seen her. Way hey, you rollin' river. Been 7 long years since I've seen her. Way hey, I'm bound away, 'cross the wide Missouri." I said, "Yep, that's a sad song." I didn't think it was pretty at all. She squeezed my hand and said, "Isn't it? It's about an Indian man and woman who can't see each other for 7 years, but in all that time they still stay in love, no matter what happens. It reminds me of my mother and father." "Your dad's been gone for 7 years before?" She looked out over the creek like it was a big, eggy moon, had her hypnotized. I pulled my hand from hers and said, "Well, that's just about it for the dishes." She smiled again. "But I'll never forget this night." I didn't tell her, but I probably wouldn't forget it either. I'd practiced on the back of my hand before, but this was the first time I ever busted slobs with a real live girl. We looked we loaded all the dishes in the box and walked down to Bugs and the other kid. We put the dishes on top of we put their dishes on top of ours and headed back. Bugs said, "How come you look so strange, Bud? You look like you've been chucked in the head with a rock." Deeza Malone laughed, and for a second I thought she was going to rat me out. I said, "I don't know. I guess that song is making me kind of sad." Bugs said, "Yeah, it is kind of sad." Right before we got into the cardboard jungle, we passed the white people with the coughing baby at their own little fire. I said to Deeza, "How come they're off all alone? How come they're off alone? They aren't allowed to sit around the big fire? 'Cause their baby's making so much noise?" Deeza said, They've been invited, but my daddy says you gotta feel sorry for them. All they're eating is dandelion green soup. They're broke, their clothes are falling off them, their baby's sick. But when someone took them food and blankets, the man said, "Thank you very much, but we're white people. We ain't in need of a handout." When we got back to the main fire of Hooverville, we put the dishes in another box. Diesel made us turn them all upside down so if the rain got into them, they wouldn't rust. I went to the woman with my suitcase. It was in the same spot I left it, and the knots were in the twine were the kind I tie. I said, "Thank you very much, ma'am." She said, "I told you not to worry."